to the Asia half-year conference. Here we are in sunny Gothenburg, and I'm very delighted to have Carl Johan Hagman, who is the head of shipping and ferries at Stena. So Carl, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
So Carl and I are going to have a 15-minute conversation just to find out a little bit more about him, about Stena, and some thoughts on the industry. But Carl, perhaps you can just kick us off with a few things about Gothenburg.
Well, I'm so happy that so many of you are here, because Gothenburg is a very special city. It was burnt down by the Danes 4 times before it was finally built in its current form in 1621. Because before 1658, the Danes were blocking us in the southern part of Sweden, and 2/3 of the Danish economy, which by the way was twice as large as the Swedish economy, came from dues on the Baltic trade. And therefore the king decided to build this city from scratch to ensure that nobody could invade. And he didn't think Swedes were very smart because he thought we were more agrarian farmers. So he invited Dutchmen or people from the Netherlands to build a city, because it's on a river. And then there were Scotsmen from the newly united Kingdom, and then there were Germans. And he encouraged people not to speak Swedish, but to speak these foreign languages, to ensure that we were international and we were that window to the outside world. And since then, Gothenburg has had a very strong trading and shipping heritage. At a time, we had the world's largest shipyard. At a time, we actually had Sweden's largest company in the 1930s was a shipping company called Broströms, located here in Gothenburg. So we see ourselves as Sweden's window reaching out to the rest of the world, and it's a heritage we're very proud of, and to a degree celebrating today when you're all here. So thank you very much.
Oh, it's fantastic. Well, it certainly feels very fitting that we're here in Gothenburg for this conference, which is focused on the future of mobility and navigating a revolution. So when we're talking about the future of mobility, can you share something about the global nature and the volatility, I suppose, around shipping?
Well, shipping is fantastic in the sense that it's on water, and as most of you know, our oceans, 73% of the surface of the world is water, and that is regulated by the IMO. One single body that ensures that there is free access to 73% of the world's surface. Now, the nation state that came out of the Peace of Westphalia in 1648 maybe is not the best way, or the best tool rather, that we have to address all the major issues that we have today. In my view, they are all of global nature, whether it is migration, whether it's general prosperity, whether it's security, and not least the environment. But at sea, we have this one regime, and IMO works, in my view, very well. It's one of the United Nations' best functioning structures. And I think it could actually lend to some inspiration of how we can regulate the rest of the world and maybe do a slightly better job at it than what we're doing today. So since the Dutch lawyer Hugo de Groot wrote a phenomenal book called Mare Liberum in 1604, we've had a different regime than what most people have when they're on land. And that regime is such that we don't have borders, but that there is a free flow of goods, and that's what makes globalization and shipping so efficient. Actually, a legal principle, which I think should be studied more, and has then, of course, colored the way shipping has been organized and the way we're doing shipping since the 17th century.
My goodness, how interesting. Now, when we're looking about the future of shipping, I suppose, and sustainability is extremely important to Stena. Can you share some information on that?
Well, it's not only important to Stena, I think it's important to mankind and to globalization. In my view, the only real negative with globalization are the emissions that are created from transportation. 90% of goods in the world are transported at sea. And even though shipping only emits 2.3% of global CO2 emissions, it's still 1 billion tons of CO2 per year that is emitted by this transportation. So of course our greatest challenge and to ensure that globalization, in my view, all the great benefits of globalization, that we can harness them, if it is so that we can manage this transportation without that billion tons of CO2. So in Stena, we emit about 3.5 million tons of CO2, and we are in different ways trying to address that. But maybe even more importantly is to provide solutions to the 60-odd thousand vessels that are at sea that have a similar challenge as to Stena, which gives Stena, in my view, a phenomenal opportunity to actually manage the transition in a way that actually increases the value of our company and our contribution. So I think there really is a business opportunity that goes hand in hand with a moral obligation to address this great challenge that we have.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I suppose having a strong global community where you can share what you're doing at Stena with other organizations around the world must be important too.
Yeah, yes, it is, absolutely. On the other hand, I must admit that the world is a very large and complicated place, and I am in a company in Sweden, and Sweden is not the center of the world, and I may be happy for that, do I know? And there are many different perspectives, and there are many ideas of how this can be done. And most certainly, we do not have consensus either at the direction or the speed. And therefore, global legislation is so important. And I think it is really IMO that to a very high degree is setting the tone. The EU are pushing for a much more aggressive agenda and are, to a degree, actually breaking up the global consensus in its aspirations to get the rest of the world to move faster, which I personally think actually is a good thing, because these issues need to be addressed. And I think the interesting part is that there are technical solutions. There's a big conversation of how hard this industry is to abate. I would argue that if mankind really put our heads to it, it's not a hard to abate industry, as some people would say.
From your website, you talk about wanting to deliver the value to the customer for their demands of tomorrow. Does it always align, or can there be conflicts with what you're wanting to achieve and what customers are expecting?
Well, I think we've been in very interesting times over the last 2 or 3 years. And in my view, the corona pandemic, the container vessel Ever Given that was in the Suez Canal, and now the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, in different ways are speeding up a transition. And that transition is partially on the emission side. But equally important, I think many cargo owners are reviewing their supply chains. And I think what all of our customers are telling us is they want more visibility from end to end. And with that visibility, amongst other things you can do is drive optimization. That's incredibly important also from a emissions and sustainability point of view, knowing what you are doing and having that full transparency. So I think a lot of cargo owners are looking for an ease of doing business through the whole value chain. And I think we're seeing a lot of integration in the whole transportation and logistics sector, which develops a lot of, I think, both interesting business models, but also a number of interesting services. So I think many of our customers are asking for digital solutions that enable them to optimize. On the other hand, I think we are then independently as an industry trying to sell solutions that have lower emissions profiles. And I can only say that is very difficult. And I think when we have direct consumers involved, it's a lot easier to have cargo owners pay for lower emission profiles or zero emissions for that matter. I still think we have a far way to go when it comes to global transactions and in the business to business side to get cargo owners to share the burden of this transition, because it's not for free. I would argue that the costs are not enormous, bearing in mind the enormous fluctuation of underlying freight rates that we are seeing in spot markets. So I think we can absorb this, but there has to be a willingness across the board to pay for better quality, particularly when it comes to environmental emissions. And there I think we can do a lot more by working together with our customers.
Great. No, that's really good. Well, also thank you so much for being on the panel today. You were talking about pandemics, sanctions and the environment, current and future challenges for the industry. And it's great that you're here part of this global young lawyers community. But just as we were chatting earlier, you shared that you're a lawyer and the world needs more lawyers.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Yeah, I started off as a maritime lawyer, and in these days especially, if we have legal systems that actually protect individuals and hopefully take out the better side of humanity, I think that could the world be intelligently guided and regulated, that might not sound politically correct in these days, by people who actually are reflecting on the value of human integrity and human rights for that matter. I think the world would be a lot better place. We need more reflecting lawyers in positions of influence. That I'm definitely sure of.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you shortly.
Okay, thank you very much. I've had a great day.